Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Little, and I am the president of the Board of Directors for Veterans Voices Writing Project. On behalf of the board, I welcome you to our annual Veterans Pin celebration. In keeping with the COVID-19 year of 2020, the Veterans Pin celebration is virtual this year, and we are coming to you from Kansas City in the VFW Museum, just down the hall from the Veterans Voices Writing Project office in the VFW building. The plus side of being virtual is that we have the opportunity to welcome veterans, supporters, and donors from all over the country who in other years could not travel to be at our annual VPC. In 1946, Elizabeth Fontaine organized a group of women in the Chicago area to form a therapeutic writing program to work with World War II veterans hospitalized in a VA hospital. As more and more veterans began writing their stories, it became evident that something had to change to keep these veterans encouraged to write. So in 1952, Margaret Sally Keach and Gladys Hellsberg gathered a group of women in the Kansas City area to begin publishing the writing of these veterans, and Veterans Voices was born. Since that first issue was published in 1952, Veterans Voices has published the stories and poetry of veterans in 3 issues each year. Today, VVWP serves all veterans with therapeutic writing programs to help heal their unseen emotional and moral wounds. Veterans write about personal experiences and innermost thoughts to help manage the effects of PTSD and reduce the risk of suicide. This program is designed to acknowledge military veterans' experiences and build self-esteem through creative expression. It offers the opportunity for community and writing groups, and these stories, essays, poems, and artwork can be submitted through our website for potential publication in Veterans Voices magazine. This program continues its work for those who served in the Korean, Vietnam, and Gulf Wars. Now with the return of injured veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, and other recent conflicts, this project is more important than ever. Mental well-being is an important component in the health of returning military veterans. Our program helps veterans heal from the physical and psychological drama associated with military service, whether from actual combat, war training, or emotional trauma. This project also helps military personnel transitioning into civilian life to heal from emotional scars by encouraging them to write down their thoughts, concerns, and reflections. For nearly 70 years, this program has offered veterans an opportunity to see their writings appear in Veterans Voices. What is still unique about this program is that veterans' stories and experiences are published to a national audience. There are countless programs that use writing as therapy, and some have been published in book form or for a local audience. But Veterans Voices has published more than 60,000 veterans' writings since 1952 and is mailed throughout the country to individuals, VA centers, libraries, veterans and auxiliary organizations, and others who support the program. And it is still the only magazine with its content solely written by veterans. 2021 will mark VVWP's 75th anniversary. We are a 501c3 organization, and for all those years, we have been sustained in many ways. Grants from foundations, sponsors of the magazine, as well as various posts from the VFW and Auxiliary, American Legion and Auxiliary, and DAV and Auxiliary have supported us. However, it is the individual donor, whether you're an author who returns their check with a donation or someone who supports the magazine as a way to support veterans, that goes a long way in sustaining the Veterans Voices magazine. Funds also can come through us from Amazon Smile. The COVID-19 restrictions have pushed online shopping to a whole new level. So as you shop online, you can donate to VVWP through your purchases on Amazon. Sign up for the Amazon Smile through our website. For the year 2020, the COVID-19 has changed many aspects of this country and around the world. Many things may never be the same again. While it has changed the amount of donations that have come to VVWP, it has not changed the mission or vision of the organization. Our mission is to enable military veterans to experience solace and satisfaction through our writing and visual arts program. And our vision is a world where people appreciate that writing and art can both heal and entertain. For nearly 75 years, Veterans Voices Writing Project has accomplished both our mission and vision. And with your help, we endeavor to continue to provide veterans an avenue of both healing and creativity. VVWP is managed by a volunteer board of directors. These board members are committed to the mission and vision of this organization. Our office is staffed by a part-time person. Catherine Mendez worked as a volunteer for many years and now holds down the office and is the person that you'll talk to when you call the office. Many of you know Chris Chansky, who was in the office for over 16 years and retired in 2018. She now serves on the board of directors. In the fall 2019 issue of Veterans Voices, we expanded our outreach to include the visual arts. Through the encouragement and support of Dr. Robert Rubin, we added a 4-page spread of visual arts submitted by veterans. Today, we bring you a sample of these veteran artists. After this presentation, Margaret Clark, Editor-in-Chief of Veterans Voices, will introduce our speaker.
It is affirming and heartwarming when one encounters a comrade in arms. And in VVWP's case, it is someone who believes as fervently as we do in the therapeutic value of writing. Our speaker today is such a person. Thor Ringler is the National Program Manager for My Life, My Story, and as the writer-editor in charge of the program at his VA in Madison, Wisconsin, he has helped hundreds of military veterans write their stories. Today, My Life, My Story program is available at over 50 VA medical facilities across the country, and Thor is the National Program Director for the entire project. Thor is a poet and a therapist. He has an MFA in poetry from the University of Pittsburgh and an MS in marriage and family therapy from Edgewood College. Thor believes that writing about the military experience can hasten healing, and that is also the goal of VVWP. We encourage veterans to tell their story through prose and poetry, and then we offer them national exposure with publication in Veterans Voices magazine. To learn more about Thor's writing program, check out his guest editorial on page 2 of the fall 2020 issue of Veterans Voices. If your magazine hasn't arrived yet in the mailbox, it should arrive within the next week. Watch for it. Mine came today. Please welcome Thor Ringler as he talks about the benefits of writing life stories. And if you have a question for him, type it in the chat box and he will answer as many as time allows. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Veterans Pen Celebration. My name is Thor Ringler. I work for the Veterans Administration. I work at the Madison, Wisconsin VA Hospital, and I run the My Life, My Story program for the VA system. And I'm here to talk with you a little bit about that today and how we run our program of story gathering and listening to the veterans of stories and honoring those stories, because we think that it's related to the work that all of you do when you do your writing and think about how to reflect on your own life and bring those stories to other people in your lives. So a short introduction about our program. So it's called My Life, My Story. We interview veterans who are enrolled in VA healthcare at different VA hospitals around the country. We ask them about their lives. It's usually about an hour-long interview. We ask them what they would like to share with their healthcare team at the VA about their lives and experiences. And from those interviews, we write up a short story based on what the veteran told us. And then after we have that story written up, we review it with the veteran and then go back to him or her, get their corrections or changes. And once they're happy with the story, we print out copies for them to share with friends and family. And we also put a copy of their story in their VA medical record. It's a way for their doctors and nurses, care team at the VA, learn more about them as a person and about what they've been through in their lives. And so that they're more than just a patient when they come to the VA. So I'm gonna go ahead and read one of these stories and just clarify that these are stories that where veterans have consented to share their stories outside the medical record. They've signed a consent form that allows us to do that. We have changed their names, but the stories are theirs. So I'll start with Bert. My dad couldn't stand bananas. His buddy couldn't stand chocolate. The reason for it? They were both in World War I, and when the war was over, they went to Paris. I don't know how many pies they bought there, but it sickened both of them for life. Dad was with the infantry and got wounded in France in that massacre. He didn't talk about it, but I know he got wounded by a grenade. They used to go at night from our trenches over to the German trenches to see if they could break through. I was born in East Troy, Wisconsin in 1923, a few years back. When the Depression came, my grandma and grandpa lost the farm and lived in town. It was the two of them, plus our 5, plus my uncle Martin's 5, and my mom came back home. There were 4 of that original squad left. We'd had so many subs and replacements that got wounded or killed. Things happen in war. I've seen a lot of blood and guts. I don't like to think about it. Lost a lot of friends. I have a good friend, Tommy, who died not too long ago. I'd say 1995. Spent his whole life in a wheelchair. I could have got it good right there too, but luck was on my side and it wasn't on his. Good guy. He went home. His sister, who never married, took care of him. She's still alive. She'll be 93 at the end of March. I'd say Tommy did pretty good. The DAV gave him a van with hand controls that he could drive. He drove that till the last 10 years of his life. It had a dent in every corner. Tommy used to laugh about it, but he always made it when we had our little reunions after the war. We were in Bavaria when the war ended. I never knew the name of the town, maybe because we celebrated too much. We drank anything we could find. They had a communal brewery in town. You'd walk in the door, and there'd be 5 or 6 barrels up against the wall, kind of oval shaped. The first guy who walked in there couldn't get the beer out, so they just took their guns and blasted one of the barrels. When the war was finally over, I came back to Verona, Wisconsin, and worked in my dad's grocery store for a couple of years. Kelly and I got married in 1946. We had one son, John, pretty late. I went to photography school in Dallas, Texas on the GI Bill. I worked for a photo studio, Ryerson, which is no longer there. I finally went out on my own in Middleton, Kleinschmidt Studio. That was in 53. I liked people mostly. Did a lot of weddings. The ceremonies were all about the same. But after the wedding and the wedding dance, that was a lot of fun. Smitty's Dance Hall in Wanakee, Club 18 in Mount Horeb. Gotta remember them. I wonder if Smitty's is still there. I got out of the photography business though. I started having a reaction to the chemical and the developer. I had sales jobs after that. Sold cars, sold insurance, sold metal cutting saws for a company out of Verona. I retired from that. I hate to admit it, but I've been retired a long time. Call it 1980, which would make it 40 years. Retirement's been about as good as you can imagine, to do things that you always wanted to do. I had a good friend in Verona who was a great hunter. We've gone on hunting trips to Alaska and northern Quebec for caribou, Colorado for mule deer, Wyoming for antelope, all with a bow. I'm too old for it now. When it got tough to pull a bow, I gave it up. I still live in the house that my wife and I built in 1965. Taxes are terrible. My wife died about 10 years ago. Up until this last year, I had a big garden. I also did a lot of woodworking, and I feed a lot of birds, or I did. There's something wrong with the birds this year. I used to get flocks of different kinds of birds as they travel through. I'm not getting any birds at the feeders anymore. But I managed to keep busy. When you're by yourself, you don't realize how much time it takes just to do the laundry, mow the lawn, which I don't do anymore, and shovel snow, which I don't do anymore. Yeah, there's a lot of things you don't do, and pretty soon the day is gone. But you'll find that out someday. When we were over in Germany, we found a wooden crate of Hennessy brandy that was bottled in the 1930s. The bottles were all wrapped in straw and matting, so they didn't break when they got shipped home. I don't know who shipped them back or how. Back in 46, they didn't pay much attention to what you shipped home, except for machine guns. They didn't like that. When we used to have our meetings after the war, we'd open a bottle or two, depending on how many people had died since last year. Tommy kept the bottles, and we finally got down to 2. When Tommy died, his sister let the DAV come in and clean out all his clothes and mementos. She didn't want anything to do with them. I think that's where the last 2 bottles went. They were always under his bed. She knew about it, but I hate to ask her now. One of us was supposed to keep that last bottle. So that's an example of one of the stories of a veteran we interviewed here at the Madison VA. And I think it gives a good feeling for the kinds of stories that we do and how we tell them. We always try to use the veteran's voice, use his or her way of talking. So we try to capture their sort of person and their voice in these stories. So, I mean, one thing that people ask me is, what is this experience like for veterans? And I think it's a valuable experience for them. First of all, because they get to have someone listen to them and they get to talk about their life, but they also get copies of the story. So at the end of our, when the story gets approved by the veteran, he or she asks for as many copies as they want. And we've had requests up to 100 copies for older veterans who have big families. So they get to take the stories back home with them and share those with their friends and family. So I think that's an important part for them. But I also feel like the story itself, the telling of it is a valuable thing for veterans. And We do have some quotes here from veterans who were interviewed for the project, and I wanted to read some of these, give you kind of the flavor of the different way that veterans respond to being listened to and have their story given back to them. Excuse me. This is the first quote. As long as I've been doing things with the VA, nobody has ever asked me anything about my life. There was never anybody to tell because nobody wanted to listen. This is the first time. And here's another quote, talking a little bit more about the reflective quality of the stories and how it lets people look back on their life and perhaps see themselves differently or think of themselves differently than they have in the past. Going through this process of writing my life story has helped relieve some of the pain, physical and emotional. But more importantly, just when I thought I hadn't made an impact on anyone's life, after sharing my story with family and friends, I realized that I did. And then there's two quotes here from veterans who speak to the, excuse me, I'm just gonna drink some water here. Speak to the quality of being able to talk about things that you haven't talked about before. And we do in these interviews talk with veterans about things that they might not have talked about with family or friends, or might not have thought about themselves for a long time, and how that can be a positive experience for them. This quote, the interview was enjoyable. I said things that I had never told anyone. I'm now saying those things to my friends and family. It feels good. And this quote, thank you very much. This was very worthwhile. It gave me the opening to share thoughts and memories that were buried for 40 plus years. So one valuable part, I think, of this way of doing stories, and there's a lot of different ways to do stories, is that it gives veterans a chance to reflect on their lives and also start talking and thinking about things that they might not have talked about or shared before with friends and family. And the story can be a way for them to sort of approach subjects that they might not have felt like they could talk about before. And writing is a really great way to express or touch those emotions that you might not feel comfortable sharing with another person face to face. It's a great way to look back and feel through some of the things that you've been through, think about some of your experiences, and then through the process of writing through that, transfer onto the paper and then the editing process, it becomes something that you can then share with other people. You have control over it and you can decide what to share with them. So I think in that way, the work that we do of interviewing is really similar to the work that you do when you work on your own stories, when you create your own writing. You're taking something that's internal, you're processing it, bringing it out, putting it on the page, and then shaping it into something that you feel comfortable sharing or not. So I think in a way, that process is very similar to what we do with My Life, My Story, except it starts with an interview rather than someone writing it down individually. So another question that we get frequently is, well, this is great. This is great for veterans, and it's obviously good for them to get these stories and share them with family. But what impact does it have on providers? What impact does it have on VA providers here, on nurses and doctors who read the stories? Does it have an impact? What happens when you put these stories in a medical record? Do doctors read them? And first of all, I'm just going to read a couple more quotes here from different providers at the VA who've given us feedback about the program. And this is an email that we got from an endocrine fellow at the Durham VA. And they sent this email to the program director there after reading one of the story notes. I would like to, and in the medical record, the note is called My Story. So that's what they're referencing here. And this is the doctor. I would like to thank you for the My Story you did on a veteran I saw in clinic today with one of the Duke endocrine fellows. When we reviewed the medical part of the record, he was a 61-year-old male, history of diabetes management, previous glipizide, A1C, 11.9, 1027, now on insulin, without known complication, PTSD, MDD, chronic pain on methadone, OSA, SP, UPP, on CPAP, recent hospitalization for empyema, presenting for ongoing management of his diabetes. After we read the My Story, he became a hero in our eyes. Turns out he was in the 82nd Airborne Division as a machine gunner. He joined the Army boxing team and spent a year as a novice boxer, winning a tournament and training for the 1976 Olympics. He was a cook in Afghanistan, and with only 11 helpers, he cooked for 11,000 soldiers. He still cooks for his wife. He now helps other veterans by taking care of their spiritual needs as a pastor. It was wonderful to have this background on the veteran before we saw him in clinic. The fellow commented that she would love to read a my story on all the patients we see. Knowing he is a cook, we could tailor our diet education to meet his needs. Knowing that he had been active in sports helped us counsel him on the importance of physical activity in managing diabetes. So that's an example of how a story actually helped the provider not only feel more connected with the veteran, but think of ways to engage with them so that they could improve their health and come up with motivations that the veteran might have to improve his or her health. So that's a way directly that you can see that providers value the stories and they give them insight into the patients and turn the patients that they work with into people more. And then I'll just read another quick quote here. And this is another one along the same lines. Reading the patient's story was like opening up an entirely new side of him. He has been chronically ill, and it seems like his life has largely been in the hospital for the last year. And at times, it seems that his medical problems have become his identity. Reading his My Life, My Story opened up a whole new side to him for us as a team. He grew up with a huge family. His mother was an important part of his upbringing. He was a sports star. He had dreams and aspirations. As a young man, he flew to the entire side of the world to fight for our country. Thank you for helping us really see our patient. He is such a special human, and it's such an important reminder to all of us to take time in our busy days to get to know the extraordinary humans that we care for every day. So those are some quotes from providers about the value that they see in the stories. And then I just like to also show a little chart here that I'll hold up to the screen so you can see it. Just talking about how the program has become more accepted by providers over the 6 or 7 years that it's been running at the VA. And this is just some data that we did through anonymous surveys that we sent out to providers at the Madison VA. And in this chart here, I hope you can see it. Is it backwards, guys? So stories change the story. So in 2014, we asked Madison VA providers whether reading my story notes was a good use of their clinical time. And you can see their responses here in the blue columns. We also asked them if reading my story notes would help them provide better treatment or care. And you can see those responses in red columns. So you can see that we were pretty happy with this because most of the providers either agreed or strongly agreed with both those statements. And this gave us a sense that we were on the right track. Now, what's really interesting though, is if we take this and then 3 years later, we asked exactly the same questions. And it's interesting to see how the responses change. So I'm bringing up the 2017 numbers. And you can see how the responses have all shifted to the right. And so now most of the providers strongly agree with both the statements. And we have very few we have none who strongly disagree, a couple who disagree. And so basically the whole chart has shifted from this one whole bar over to this over the course of 3 years. So in our mind, that's a really good indication that providers are seeing value in the stories and also figuring out how to use the stories and more in their clinical care and getting more of a sense of how the stories can help them in their work with veterans. And thanks for inviting me here today. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I really hope that I get you the message that it's great to share stories, however you do it, whether you do this the way our program does it, where you interview someone or have someone interview you and write up your story, or whether you do that reflection and writing on your own. There's a way in which it makes something helps us to make sense of life and helps other people to make sense of your life. And it's also a way to preserve things that you may have in your mind very clearly, but your family might not know about. And it might be a way for them to hold on to those things that you've held on to your life too and share it with them. So once again, my name's Thor Ringler with My Life, My Story. And thank you everyone for having me here today. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you, Thor. Appreciate your giving us a great explanation of My Life, My Story. We have had some questions that have come in on the chat line, so I'm going to read those to you and let you answer those, and then we'll kind of go along as we go along the questions here. There's a couple that came in that are kind of related, so I'm going to give you kind of two questions here.
Okay.
Women historically have not been in combat. Is there a common thread in the stories from women? And then the other one is, have you interviewed women veterans or done a special project around their experiences?
Yeah, okay, so those are both great questions. By the way, thanks everybody for joining the call. And this is me live. The other thing that was me recorded. So just so, so yeah, regarding women veterans. So those are both great questions. So I think at Madison, we don't necessarily focus on interviewing female veterans, but some of our other sites do. The Bronx VA has a program where they primarily focus on interviewing female veterans and getting their stories. So that's definitely something that you can do. And also the, actually the Reno VA and the Boston VA are working on a project together right now where they're interviewing female veterans and having photos taken of the veterans. And then they have something that they call a Women Veterans Roadshow, which is like poster sized pictures of female veterans with their stories underneath. And this is has been exhibited throughout Nevada. Now they're adding in Boston. And so this traveling roadshow is going to be going from VA to VA, sort of just obviously building awareness and making people aware of the huge contributions that women veterans have had to military service. Just regarding the question about themes, boy, that's a great question. I think it's really hard to, for me, having interviewed a lot of people, interviewed a lot of female veterans and male veterans, to kind of narrow in on a theme. Myself, not being a veteran, not coming from a military background, I think one thing that I've learned more than anything from interviewing hundreds of veterans is that experiences are all unique and different, and as unique and different as people who haven't served in the military. So I would say it's gotten actually harder for me to generalize about the veteran experience, if anything. If anything, it's become more complicated and just more varied than I could have imagined it. So, I mean, I think there's definitely a difference between female veterans who served back in the World War II era and those who serve today in terms of, their sense of, being, being less of a minority than they were back in those times. But the actual experience of, of female veterans in the service, seems remarkably similar for the themes that occur over time. Obviously the great pride that they feel there, the sense of connection that they feel, and also the sense of, what's the word? Just being in a place where they can be recognized for their skills in a way that they might not have been able to be recognized in civilian life. So that's something that's been a common theme.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The next one is, do you have a favorite outcome from your program?
That's a great question. Yeah, so there's two favorite outcomes that I like. I think of two of them, and they're a little funny because one is kind of a desired outcome and one is not. So I think my favorite outcome is when when veterans share their stories with their family members, and in particular when I go back and read a story and the veteran is suggesting changes and making edits. I love the time when there are family members in the room there, and they're always shaking their heads and going, "Hey, you never told us that," So it's like, that's always a great moment, right? Because they're learning about something for the first time from someone who they know and love very well, and it feels nice to be a part of that sort of learning process for them. And I would say the other thing that the other outcome that I like is, for the program, the writer does the interview and writes up the story, and then the veteran is free to do whatever they choose with that. So those edits that they make can be really minor. They can just say, "Oh, you got the date wrong, you got the name wrong," and it's usually that. Those are usually the edits. Sometimes veterans come back and they rewrite the whole story completely, and And that's wonderful for us, because for me, that means that our program, doing the interview has given them the inspiration to write their own story. And it's obviously really different than the one that we wrote, and obviously, it covers the same stuff. But for me, that's really a success, because it's given them the inspiration to write in their own words about their life. So both of those are kind of examples of that, I would say.
Great. Okay. Is there any topic that is taboo in your program?
Not really. I mean, not really. I mean, I would say that there are certain topics because we're writing about people's experiences, we're more interested in, I would say, what's happened to them in their life rather than their opinions, if that makes sense. So we tend to shy away from politics because it's, just like a personal thing that people have. We're more interested in what people have lived through, and for the most part, that's what people talk about. But no, I would say there was nothing that was off record. We try to reflect back what people want to talk about. We ask them just to share what they're comfortable sharing. Sometimes those stories are military, focused primarily on the military experience, and other times veterans specifically want to not talk about that at all. So we give them the free rein to talk about what they want to feel, what they feel most comfortable with.
Good. Okay. Is your program restricted to hospitalized vets? And do you accept drawings or poems?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Great question. So no, it's not restricted to hospitalized vets. The criteria for participating is being enrolled in VA healthcare and having a My Life, My Story program at your VA. Those are the criteria. We don't at the moment do anything other than the written story. We don't do photos or artwork. I would say that's probably mostly to do with the limitations of our medical record, because we have a older medical record, and that's actually due to be replaced over the course of the next 10 years. And so when we get to that new system, and that transition is in process right now, it'll be a more modern system, and you'll be able to actually put images in there and things like that. And so that should open the program up to those kinds of self-reflective pieces and storytelling.
Okay, great. How many VA hospitals have you been to?
So we're at,
I guess,
60 VAs right now, and
Okay.
we've interviewed about it's like over 5,000 veterans, so 5,400 veterans, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Are volunteers used in VAs to capture these stories, and are they permitted to do it now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So volunteers are permitted at most VAs to do the stories, and a lot of the programs at different VAs rely on volunteers. Specifically at Madison, where the program started, where I am, 2/3 of our stories are done by volunteers. And I should say we're done by volunteers until COVID started. So we've been on pause with volunteers coming into the facility since March. And we're actually looking at ways right now. We're coordinating with voluntary services for the VA nationwide, seeing if there's a way that we can get volunteers to do these over the phone or over video, so we can sort of increase again volunteer participation in the program. So that's something we're actively pursuing right now, because we're, obviously we have the thought that COVID's probably going to be around for at least another 6 to 9 months. So we want to.
Right, doesn't appear to be going away.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be going away, and so that's the plan.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there clinical evidence that writing helps therapeutically?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely clinical evidence that writing your own story, there's a lot of clinical evidence out there that writing down your own story has health benefits for you, both psychologically and just in terms of things like stress and blood pressure, things that's actually related specifically to things that you can measure. And that's been documented pretty well. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the guy who did that research right now, but that's actually documented quite well. That has a lot to do with writing down stories, especially stories of trauma. So the idea of writing down traumatic stories, writing down your own traumatic story, there's a lot of evidence that improves mental health and also some aspects of physical health. Less studied about whether, interviewing someone and writing up their story like we do, has the same benefit that's something that we will be looking at in the coming years as we keep moving forward.
Okay. Do the aides that work with these veterans ask if they would send their stories to Veterans Voices magazine?
No, but that's a great, that's a really great thing to do.
Little plug
That's a
there.
great question. It's a good question. Makes me feel embarrassed. That's great though. I like that idea. So I think we'll start doing that. So that's a really good thing
Okay.
to do. I think one thing
All
we've been
right.
thinking about is, having some sort of material that we give out at the end with a story about other places that veterans could share their stories. And I think that would be a great idea. So
Great.
point well taken.
We're always looking
Yeah.
for submissions.
Yeah.
How can a veteran, I guess a VA group or individual sign up for your program?
So let's see, hold on. The best thing to do right now probably is just to contact me. I'll just put my email address in the chat box here. So I'll do the group email, then that comes to my whole team at Madison. So I just put that in the chat. So that's an email address. If you email that address, that'll come to me and the other people on my team at Madison, and then we'll be able to tell you, first of all, if there's a program in your area at your VA, and then if there is, connect you with a contact there. We also have more
Okay.
general information about the program available. Or I'll just dump a URL in there into the chat box as well. So that's a website, a VA website that we have some information on too, and there's contact information there. Great question.
Okay. And this is probably a little bit like that one too, is how can we get a women's veterans project at our VA?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
thank
so what I would do is if you're specifically interested in that, send me an email at that email address there, and I'll connect you with the program coordinator at the Reno VA, and her name is Krista Burr. She's a Marine Corps veteran, and she's heading up that effort, so I can connect you with her.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
One last question here. All
Sure.
right, rape and sexual harassment are common themes that I hear from women vets.
Yeah.
Do you hear about those?
Yes, a lot, and I would say that. When someone asked earlier, what are the common themes of female veteran stories, I would have to say that unfortunately is one of the major common themes of female veterans that we hear. So
Okay.
kind of shockingly so. And I have heard from women and men who have been sexually, assaulted in the military, and those stories are obviously hard for them to tell. But some people do want to share those stories. One of the reasons why what I've heard from veterans who've shared those stories with me is that they actually want to be able to have those stories in the record, so that when a VA provider asks them, they can just say, oh, just read my story. And then they don't have to tell the story, which,
To go through it.
anyone who's experienced trauma knows that retelling a story is re-traumatizing in a way. So there's actually a benefit for folks who've experienced trauma to do that. They can just say, oh, I got it there, you can
Okay.
read it. Yeah. Great,
All right.
great question.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your questions. And thank you again, Thor, for a
Yeah.
glimpse into the program of My Life, My Story. We appreciate the work you do with bringing out these stories of the veterans and how it is not only helpful to the veteran, but also to those who provide medical service to the veteran. Your quote from the VA doctor, "These stories turn patients into people," follows right along with the mission of Veterans Voices to continue to provide veterans an avenue of both healing and creativity. Many of our veteran authors have commented on how much their writings have provided their families with a better understanding of the effects of military service on their lives. And that's something that you touched on with talking about the families being there and saying, oh, I've never heard that before. So it's a great partnership we've got here. So thank you all for attending our virtual PIN celebration. It has been exciting to welcome people from all over the country to this event. Remember, you can donate today by simply going to veteransvoices.org and click on donation. And as we continue to navigate this COVID-19, Please stay safe and enjoy the fall 2020 issue of Veterans Voices that's coming to a mailbox near you. Thank you and good afternoon.